think we're live. Guys, today I'm going to be talking all about how you can stabilize your lower back after injury. We're talking about stabilizing this lumbar spine. If you've got a lower back injury, you've got a herniated disc, you're experiencing sciatica, you might have been told you've got some SLHH issues. How do we stabilize this region? Because let's face it, it's if you're moving in one direction or another that you're having these flare-ups, it's giving you pain, and it keeps on going in this vicious cycle. So hopefully these exercises are gonna make some sense to you guys so that you can start stopping the ongoing flare-ups that are happening over and over again. Because if we start to understand that it is the movement that is happening, that is when we are irritating our lower back, we realize that the wisdom in, oh, we'll just get it moving more, just do some knee rocks, just bend and twist a little bit more, your spine is meant to move, doesn't quite make sense. So I'll get straight into it, guys. And if you've got any questions, as always with these, if you're live, great. You can post down in the comments. I'll get straight into those Q&A sessions as soon as I can. And obviously, if you're watching this after the fact on YouTube, then you guys can post in the comment section as well, because we read and reply to all of those. So, with that out of the way, what are we trying to achieve here? Number one, we're doing exercises in which during the exercise, whatever version we're doing, the spine should not move, okay? If the spine moves, or rather, if you experience pain during any of these exercises, then you are doing something wrong. And that's okay. It's a good realization to say, hey man, I'm not quite as good at this exercise as I thought I might be. And that means we've got something to improve, right? And the great thing about this is that although recovering from these kind of disc bulges or herniations can take a little bit of time, your technical improvement in these exercises can start to improve from day one, which means you get benefits from day one and things will start to click. And yeah, sure, you might take a little bit of time to master it, but so very important. The other really important thing about these exercises is that, well, two important things. Number one is if you can't do what I demonstrate in a second, then you can do an easier version. If you can't do it, you can go a little bit less far on the movement. And equally, someone's commented here, can severe stenosis heal? You know, this is going to help for those kind of things, right? If you've got stenosis, when your spine moves on these exercises, which it shouldn't do, you will get away with less movement before you get irritation and pain. So it's a good sign that you're doing things wrong if you're experiencing pain while you do these. So we need to do them correctly. That's the important part. The second really important benefit for 4 out of these exercises is that when you are getting good at them, you are going to use these to literally rebuild strength and health into the spine, literally strengthen up the discs, the segments of the spine that are injured. Again, it's worth repeating, L4-5 and L5-S1, the green to green here and the green to the orange. These are the segments of the lumbar spine that the vast majority of you, that's where the epicenter of the root cause is. So the first exercise that you're going to do, as many of you guys might have heard about these exercises before or seen these exercises before, we're going to look at the dead bug. Super easy. I'm just going to check you guys can actually see on here. Turn that around a little bit. So the dead bug. What is the process of the dead bug? When we're doing the dead bug exercise, we're engaging the midsection here. We're holding the spine nice and steady, and then we're using our legs or arms to create a pull. And what that means is, as my leg moves out, there is the propensity for my spine to want to arch, bend, or move in some way. And my job of the core is to not let that happen. The great thing about this one is that you can do it on the floor. You don't need to do it, you don't need to even be load bearing. If you're struggling to get out of bed, you can do it on the bed, okay? So you're lying on your back, you've got your spine like so. You obviously don't lie on a thing like this. I've got this step here just because of the video, right? Just because of the setup. You engage your core nice and tightly, you hold this spine steady, you come up to a tabletop position, one leg, you come up to the second leg, and then we're just going out like so, okay? There's a reason that we have, like so. There's a reason, obviously you wouldn't have your head up either, you relax like so, hands on the waist. There's a reason that we do the dead bug without the arms. Some people will teach the dead bug with the arms up here. A lot of you guys will struggle to perform the dead bug. You struggle to feel where your spine is. And so you hold on to this section so you can feel the core. You can feel that it's working. One of the errors that happens when you do the dead bug is as your leg arches, your tummy will rise. And the back is arching, as the leg goes out and the tummy is rising because you're not controlling the core. So having your hands there allows you to feel that. Feel if it's failing, if it's not quite working, right? Very important that we stop that happening. And using our hands, wobbling them around up here on the dead bug is kind of a waste of time, right? It's not useful. Having them here helps you feel what's going on and helps you realize maybe when you're not controlling it as well as you should be. So that's number one, the dead bug, and we can vary these, right? Then we got the marching bridge. it always makes me laugh when you guys go into the your physio appointment and say, right, John, you can do 10 squats, but we're going to build your glutes by doing marching bridges. It's like, you're not building anything. Marching bridge is a bridge, static bridge, right? A static bridge is basically doing nothing, right? Apart from in the person that's literally been doing nothing in bed, they've been bed bound in hospital for like 6 months, the glute bridge isn't going to be building anything, I would argue. It's just not exerting enough strain on the system to actually result in muscular change. And so when we're doing the marching bridge, the reason we choose a marching bridge is not to build or anything like that in your glutes. It's to provide a stabilization left to right. Because as you put the weight through one leg, you need to stabilize the spine so it doesn't move and twist. What's that like? Oh, walking, because you're weight bearing on one leg and then the other, one leg and then the other, to learn to provide some stability. So while we're on the floor doing our marching bridge, we're engaged, we're coming up, and then obviously we lift on one leg, and then we pop it back down, and we're engaged and we're tight, lifting on one leg. Notice, we're not trying to do a super high bridge. That's not the purpose here. The purpose is to just get the weight on the legs, and then shift from one side over to the other. Again, when you do those wrong, you're going to find that you experience some pain. The pain is because your spine moved in one way or another, because we didn't control the spine. Now, before I get on to the next 4, I'll just have a look at a couple of questions here. Oscar said, what exercises can you recommend for building the forearms? Continue to progress with your hip hinges and your squats, right? Those are going to be, well, the hip hinges, sorry, are going to be the most effective way. Your deadlift, because you're holding on to stuff, right? Oscar, I think before you start jogging and worrying about these other things, I think you just need to refine those dead bugs a little bit more. You found the right variation, very easy one. We just need to find what's leaking in the dead bug. Why are we messing things up on the dead bug if we do a harder variation? So I would focus on refining that first. And he said, can I do a side plank instead of the torso rotation one? I think you're referring to the abdominal rotation. I personally stick to an abdominal rotation, personally. I think they're better. Or a side bend. Hi, Jeff. Since starting the core, Jeff has said, since starting the core 5 exercises, my lower back stiffness and pain has decreased. So is my bulging disc actually healing, or am I just getting stronger? I don't know where you are, Jeff, in the process, fundamentally, in terms of what kind of load you're using. But in the early instances, your progress with the core 5. So if I explain to you guys how progressing with exercises like these work, your rehab works. This is how your rehab works to get your back injury better. When you start doing the exercise, I mean, it's great. Jeff's noticing that his back stiffness and pain is decreasing, right? That's awesome, right? That's the idea. That's what happens. But understanding why is very important, and how, so you know what's going on down here. When you're first doing exercises like the ones I've just discussed, and like we'll get onto in a second, the rest of the core 5 or core 6, the exercises we use in the program, right? The main benefit you're getting, the reason that you're not feeling as bad, is because you are improving the ability you have, which was perhaps non-existent before, to control and protect your lumbar spine. Now you're able to do that, and hopefully, to the degree you do this, you will be more successful. You are applying that skill to the movements of daily life. So you're better able to care for your lumbar spine, so it is getting in a vulnerable position less frequently during the day. So most of what you're doing is you're just not aggravating it as much, which means you're not as much pain, right? Remember, healing is taking place long after the pain is gone, right? Healing is taking place long after the pain is gone. Any of you guys that have a cut on the surface of your skin, my finger example is gone now from jiu-jitsu. No doubt I'll get a bump and bruise at some point in the future again, and I can use that example. But healing is happening when the scab is still there, right? So please bear that in mind. In the early stages of recovery, when you start using some elements of load with the exercises, as I'll discuss in a moment, you're strengthening up mostly the muscles around here, right? But remember, healing is happening every single day. And because you've got good technique, you're allowing healing to continue to march on in a good way, and you're improving the strength of the muscles around this area. That's good too. But literally, as you then, if you're later on in the rehabilitation process, for Jeff, I don't know that necessarily that he's quite there yet, but for example, Oscar, he's using some load, right? I think it was 60 kilos last time, 50, 60 kilos on the squat. We are literally putting load through the disc. Make no mistake. Someone commented on one of the videos, like, aren't you just putting them, isn't the muscle just load, carrying the extra weight? It's like, no, quite clearly not, quite clearly not. When you are standing and when you're doing your rehab, you are strengthening up these discs. If you're carrying a 60, 70, 80, 100 kilos, whatever it is, that is going through the disc. Now, you might have strengthened up the muscles to provide more support, but the load is still going through the disc. It's not like bypassing it. It's still going through the disc when you're holding that bar or holding that weight. You are literally in the latter stages of rehabilitation. Over the long term, I'm talking months and years now, you are building up the strength of the actual injury itself. So yes, the muscles are going to improve. They're going to do that faster. They're going to be able to protect the area better. But you are literally strengthening up the very tissues that have been injured as they respond to the load. This is why it's so important to make sure that you're actually doing the strengthening work and that you are, committed to getting long-term results and changing and looking after yourself properly. We've had members in the last couple of days posting in the group, and some of them have jumped on the live sessions here, and they are at the point where they are or pretty close to lifting more loads in their squats and hip hinges, for example, than they have ever before, period. Before they had a back injury, by the way. And I think for the vast majority of you guys watching this, you've been struggling a long time maybe, right? There is every chance that you can be stronger and more capable after your back injury if you rehabilitate it properly than you were before, because before you never devoted appropriate time to actually building these things, and you maybe didn't have the guidance, right? Jeffrey says, Palloff with bands exercises are great for the core as well. Yes, but they're going to be relegated. Traditional kind of core exercises are going to be relegated, like the two that I've just showed you guys already, are going to be relegated to what we would call primers, because a Palloff press is never going to be able to challenge your core to the same degree as a heavy squat, as a heavy hip hinge, as a heavy stepper or split squat or single leg hip hinge or suitcase carry. Those are the strongest core exercises, not what we traditionally think of as kind of no weight core bendy twisty kind of exercises. That's not that they don't have a place, but we have to understand precisely what the role of different things are at different stages in the recovery process. Darren said, I can't believe you are live, which is fantastic. Believe it, I'm here. Hopefully it's helpful. Only Van you last night, my question is I can only work 4 hours as I'm in so much pain in my lower and mid back. More or less all of you guys, right? When people join the program, for example, you guys have back pain, right? You're living life with back pain. You're frustrated. It's getting in the way gradually more and more of what you're doing every single day. And that's a real tough, it's really tough, right? Darren said, my problem is I'm very upset with myself. I'm trying to stretch and core exercises over 12 months and I'm getting no improvement. Because often you're trying to just stretch and you're trying to go to the free NHS appointments. And I remember a phrase, nothing costs more than the free thing, right? It costs you something. It's costing you something. In so much that I think it's frustrating. And I think people these days are always skeptical about people doing stuff online or whatever it may be, or going to pay someone for something when you can get it for free. But I think this allure of the fact that you might have a free NHS appointment booked in 6 weeks' time, or that you're going to, and I won't pay for rehab, I won't pay for a program, I won't pay to go and see this person because I've got my free appointment. And it's like the cost of that free appointment is in the tears that you experience when you're struggling to get better. The cost of that free appointment is in the weeks of progress that you could have been making. The cost of that appointment is the fact that you're not better. But it's a free appointment, so I'll go to my free physio appointment. It's like we've got to appropriately start to evaluate these things. They do cost us. And so that's really, really important. Hopefully some of the stuff that you're seeing here, Darren, is really helpful, and many others. It's really helping you guys start to understand what you're doing and how to move forwards. But stretching is not the answer. Just stretching doesn't do anything. Like asking the question, which repetition of my knee hug is my back going to be stronger by? Whereas as we're getting to, and I think this is a good option, I'll come back to the questions in a second, guys. You need to have exercises where you can actually measure the improvement. So, exercise number 3. We've got the squat, and I'll cover 3 and 4 together, right? These are fundamentals in the program. A lot of you guys, those of you that are members of the program, and those of you that have seen the videos on the core 5 and those other ones will know what I'm talking about, right? We've got the squat exercise and we've got the hip hinging exercise, right? Both of these, the spine should not move. Some of you will struggle with them more than others. If you experience pain when you've done it wrong. A hip hinge might only be here to start with, right? That might be all you can do. And then you get better. And you get better. And some of you guys can go way further than that. That's awesome, right? But these are pivotal exercises. Why are they so important? Number 1, they are so important because if you don't think you're doing a squat every single day, if you think the squat's not for me, we're really going to struggle. Because you're probably going to sit down in the next 5 to 10 minutes. You might already be sat down. And if you are sat down, how are you going to get out of that chair? You're going to do a squat. You can either continue to do the squat and hip hinge movements every day as part of your daily life with no guidance at all, or you can start to learn to do them correctly. It's entirely up to you. But do not be fearful of doing a formalized squat and hip hinge, because those exercises then give you the mechanism for answering that important question. How do I know I'm making progress? And how do I know how far I need to go? And how do I know how healed this herniated disc is in my lower back? The only answer we can come up with is some kind of mechanism for evaluating the integrity of the lumbar spine. And a great way to do that, because What does it do? What does the lumbar spine do? Think about what it does. It's there to load bear so you can do stuff in the real world. So testing its load bearing capacity in a safe way is going to be the best way of us measuring our progress. So if I start out, as many members and patients have over the years, and I can't even do a squat to here, oh God, that's really difficult. I can't get out of that chair because my back is so bad. I'm struggling so much, maybe like Darren, right? And then after a couple of weeks, maybe not that long, we realize I can now hold a weight, 5 kilos, and I can do a hip hinge, or I can do a squat, right? And then after a couple of weeks more, maybe a little bit longer than that, I've now got a 20 kilo. And oh gosh, look, I can do a squat now with 20 kilos. And then maybe I pick up the 36 kilo, 80-pound kettlebell in the corner, and I can do that. Is that not demonstration enough? Is that not one of the best demonstrations you can have of some kind of objective load tolerance? Because you know that you could not lift that 36 kilo kettlebell. You went over and you tried to, oh no, that's gonna be terrible for my back. I can't even carry my toddler at home because my back is so vulnerable and intolerant to load because this injury is there. But over the course of your rehab, over the 12 months that Darren's been struggling, for example, you're actually making progress. You know that you still can't do 20, but you can do 15. And you couldn't do 15 a couple of weeks ago. That is how you know how healed you are. It's not a foolproof strategy. The squat is a very confined and refined movement. It should be if you're using it at the right level of the program, right level of your progress, right? But it's the best thing you've got. You have no other reliable mechanism. That's why you focus on technique first. And Jeff's comment earlier on, you focus on getting the technique right first so you have a reliable exercise that you can do in a controlled environment to both drive and measure your technical improvement and the healing process that is taking place in these discs. So you have a very clear understanding of what your spine and your coordination and your skill and your muscle strength is capable of dealing with. And you then look back and compare it to what it was before. Very important. And so if I cover the last two exercises, then I'll come back to some of the questions, guys. So the last two, the squat and the hip hinge are the primary ones that we use for building load tolerance in the spine, right? Because they're the safest, right? You're still, your feet are on the ground. There's less variables. But then we also have movements like the step up, where we're standing, a step in the house on the bottom of the staircase will do, and we're coming up and back down again, up. We're not wobbling our pelvis left and right. We've also got, and you can hold on to support, and we always recommend you hold on to support for these, right? This, when you're doing the step up. We've also got the single leg hip hinge, like so. You'll see people doing this in the gym and they're going all the way over, and it's great, right? Fantastic. But you might just start here because that's all you have the coordination to do. Or you might barely start at all. But you start somewhere and then you build from there. And that way we've got a static load bearing way that we can build the squat and the hip hinge. We've then got these asymmetrical ones which are going to challenge one side more than the other. And we can build like that. Those are the main 6 exercises that we use within the program. Structure them in an appropriate way so that you guys can leverage those exercises to build stability, restore stability back into your lumbar spine. And then it's a case of building those over time, which is the rehabilitation process. It doesn't need to be complicated. It does need to be done, and it does take time, and it's not a foregone conclusion that you guys are going to be good at it straight out the gate. In fact, when we've been struggling for a long period of time, we're probably not. We're probably not, okay? When we're doing these exercises, to Darren's question, how often do you recommend these? What we talk about in the program is you use tutorial videos that we have over there that will help you guys figure out which variation to do, troubleshoot, use the members area for support, all these kind of things to help get used to doing them. And you practice these things when you're learning daily. And the daily practice might then incorporate it into a workout. That's what we do, right? We have the set workouts in each of the phases of the program. And then when we get into the latter stage of the program, we're learning about how do we safely start to apply load. Don't just start willy-nilly adding load on day 2, right? Unless we've met certain markers. And then later on in the recovery process, as we're building strength and resilience for the long term, we're going to be using slightly less frequent workouts, but at a higher level. So the workout intensity is there, but then we have rest days. So this is the way in which we go about doing it. Jeff has said, thank you so much for your advices and these videos. It helps a lot. God bless you. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. And Darren said, is there a way I can save this blog? Sorry, I can ask your name. Michael, right? If you want any more information, guys, you can always go and head over to the website. And if you want any more background information or any of that kind of stuff, we've got the About Us page, which gives you a little story, a little background behind the program, clinical experience, all of that kind of stuff. You can learn a little bit more over there. We did a full podcast episode. I can't remember. I think it was episode number 50 of the podcast. I think we're on, maybe we've done about 200 of them now, or thereabouts. And we did a full kind of podcast episode talking about it all. So that'll be interesting for those of you guys that are curious in that regard. And that's available on the website. Just go to the About Us tab or About tab, and you can watch the episode there. Just going over to TikTok. Guys, if you've got any questions about your back pain, your sciatica, I'm going to go and run through them now. Hopefully it's helpful. If it is, if you're on TikTok, give us a thumbs up. That'd be appreciated, or rather a little like. Is it not to have a small discomfort in the lower back when hip hinging correctly? So one of the issues you sometimes forget if you've been training for a long period of time or you've been doing this kind of stuff, you forget, right? But it's our job to remember that not everyone has been training for a long period of time. And so a lot of people aren't used to the feeling of training and what happens. So people will be like, I've just done a bunch of hip hinges. Why does my back feel tight? And it's like maybe an experiment for some of you guys to do right now, right? If you're watching and you're on your phone, put your phone in your other hand, okay? Hold your arm out like this, just out to the side, and just do small circles. And just keep doing those small circles, those little circles, just while I'm talking about this, okay? Just keep it going on the side, right? And what you're gonna feel when you're doing the hip hinges is that your muscles are working the whole time, kind of like what your shoulder's doing now. And for some of you guys, your shoulders are gonna start to be tight now. They're gonna start to burn a little bit. And it's perfectly reasonable. You can put your arm down, right? You get the idea, hopefully. When you're doing the hip hinges and you're doing 10 reps of these, right? And then you're going into 10 reps of squats, for example, right? And you're doing it carefully, you're doing it controlled, and you're not very good at it, and you're practicing, and you're tight with the core, it's perfectly reasonable to feel the tension in that area. That's not a tension that needs stretching, though. We don't need to stretch it out. It's just the normal filling of blood of a muscle that is being leveraged, a muscle that is being used. Obviously, we need to validate technique, right? And having these feelings, these sensations is completely normal. And that's one of the reasons that we have the members area. We have the program, and we have it alongside the members area. So you guys can get support that you need. Ask these kind of questions. Upload a video and go, right, this is my hip hinge. If your hip hinge looks like this, a nice neutral spine, right? And they're going down and up, and you're getting tension in the back, good. And you feel that as you get to the bottom, you feel tension in the hamstrings and tension in the back, and you're stuck and you can't move. That's good. That's the bottom of the rep. And then we come back up, right? If you're getting here and your hip hinge looks like this and you go, my back hurts, bad, right? Because we talk about two key things when we're talking about the exercises. They should be aggravation-free, meaning you're not aggravating the symptoms, even if the symptoms are not particularly painful. They might be numbness, tingling, burning, whatever it may be. And we are not doing the exercises technically correctly. We must hit those markers when we're doing these things. What else have we got? Just looking through the comments on TikTok. If you are further in the journey, are hip thrusts a good way to build core strength? Jay, that is a very good question. I'm going to come back to that in 1 second. User 437 has said, is squats good for sciatica? Yes. But you need to do them correctly. You must do them correctly, guys. The technique is really, really important. Squats are one of, if not the best exercise. We get asked sometimes, what's the best exercise for back pain or back injuries? Sciatica is a back problem. Sciatica is a back problem here that is irritating these nerves that gives you pain down the leg. It is a back problem. And squats are one of those 5, 6 exercises that I've just mentioned. So yes, that would be a very good one. The topic of hip thrusters. Why might we do a hip thruster? Well, a lot of you guys have probably been told that your glutes are weak, they're not firing, whatever that even means. I don't really know, but people just say that, right? And it's often, well, we won't even go into that in too much detail, but it gets said all the time, right? And so what works the glutes? Well, we do hip thrusters. There's plenty of stuff, you know, in the bodybuilding space and all that kind of stuff. Hip thrusters are great. Barbell hip thrusters, boom, 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 off we go. And I'm gonna do a demonstration for you guys and show you what I mean, and maybe you can have a think about this. I think further into your journey of back rehab is a very important but very non-specific statement that is very difficult to realistically draw anything from. I'm just going to use lightweight. How far in is a real question. How far into that recovery process? And so if you're like messing around with anything less than 100% of your body weight on the squat or the hip hinge, there is absolutely no point even thinking about doing the hip thrusters. And hopefully the reason will be really evident in a moment when I show you guys. Because when you think about the hip thruster exercise, if you didn't see me doing all of this, you might be forgiven for thinking that the hip thruster would be a great way for you to build those glutes, hamstrings, right? Because the weight's not really on your spine, it's on your hips. And it's cool, right? But hopefully this is making sense as I go through this nice leisurely setup. Okay? I've got all my things out. In order for me to get, if you are early on in the recovery process, you have to bear this in mind. So I'm going to get into position, look at my lower back, round my lower back, get my legs under the bar, roll it in, come up. I do my hip thrusters, I do a couple of them, right? And I come down, and then look at my lower back again. You might be able to see it. Sorry about the black on black. I roll out, and then I get up, however I get up. There is, or are, so many opportunities in that process for you to mess up your lower back. Not to mention the fact that one of the reasons that we're doing the hip thrusters, or I would argue, is that we can often load the bar up with a ton of weight, way more than we would. And I don't know how much is up here rather than, for the effectiveness of the exercise. Then you've got to take the bar apart afterwards as well, by the way. And that's going to involve you doing something that looks like this, probably. Because you've put like 5 20s on either side, and you're there like, pull them all off, right? So what you had to do to get to the position to then do the hip thruster and then get out of it, that's the problem. And I think you've got to remember, your squats and your hip hinges are going to work the glutes. So unless you're at such a lofty height in the bodybuilding space that you need extra little bit of relatively increased stimulation that a hip thruster does on the glutes versus a squat, I think you are wasting your time. And going down a route of an exercise that, as great as it is, as fun as it is for a person with no injuries, I think is fundamentally a waste of time. It's so much less effort for you to set up the barbell and continue to progress on with your squats. Granted, if you've got access to one of the machines where it's a plate-loaded version of a hip thruster and you're not having to mess around on the barbell, then fair enough, maybe you could use it. But we're just looking at adding unnecessary variation. I think one of the big problems, there's this thing about this chat, I don't know if it's still in the public domain, if you will, or the public consciousness, of, you've got to shock the muscles every so often. I think these kind of things are too often on social media. You're going to see strategies that are used by the bodybuilder that is, 260 pounds trying to put on an extra 5 pounds of muscle before their next professional bodybuilding show. And they're doing all of these quirky things in addition to the basics, by the way. And we see all the quirks and we think the quirks look fun, but we forget people are doing the basics. Just focus on doing squats and hip hinges. Those are going to be more than sufficient. You add in some of the single leg hip hinges and the step-ups, you've got everything you need. You don't need niche pieces of equipment or funny positions and setups that create unnecessary obstacles that you guys often don't think about. Right? You just don't think about how you got into the position and how you got out of the position. And that's where a lot of the accidents happen. Often, it won't be the deadlift of 150 kilos. It's the fact that you were putting the 5 kilo plates back and you just carelessly were throwing them off to the side without good form in the spine that actually creates the trouble. Oscar's added here, is our shoulder shrugs safe? Often with shoulder shrugs, you're going to be using a significant amount of load. Sorry to bounce so quickly into the next topic, but if there's any questions on that, you can post in the comments. Shoulder shrugs are often going to require a significant amount of load. The holding of the bar is going to help the forearms from the earlier comment, Oscar. But I think, it's a case of, is the load safe for you at this stage? And one of the things you have to be careful of is exposing yourself to load too frequently. Oscar, as you're scaling the load that you're using in your exercises and you're at a reasonable level, like you're going up to 50 and 60 kilos on your squats, you want to have rest between sessions to give the tissues time to adapt. And if we're now starting to look at other fun things because our back's kind of under wraps, it's being controlled, we're making progress there, and I want to do other fun things, you want to just make sure you're not adding too much cumulative loading. So maybe, and this is one of the things I'm a big proponent with, as you guys start to feel like your back's under control, you've got good rehab work, you're doing your squats with good amounts of weight. One of the guys in the members area yesterday, Ken, he's doing 80 kilos on the squat, and like 75 or something like that on the hip hinge, right? You're at good levels, right? We're doing well, the form's solid. We've made some real progress with our injury. We're really feeling strong. But I think even still, for an extended period of time, I'm talking months to a year or so, as we're really doing well with our back, I think it's worthwhile on some of those load-bearing exercises, like for example, the shrugs that Oscar's mentioning here, like overhead shoulder-based exercises. I think it's very worthwhile doing single arm only, because Oscar could probably challenge the right arm with a 30 kilo single arm hip shoulder shrug, but that's a fraction of what he would put total load through his spine in his squat. So it's giving the spine a bit of a break, but we're still going to be able to challenge shoulders a little bit, as opposed to just picking up the 60 and shrugging it out, right? And chances are with a shrug, you're probably able to do even more than that. So you've just got to be mindful of the actual load you're using compared to what your spine is capable of dealing with. Because if we're doing an upper body day to rest our back, but we're doing 60, 70 kilo shrugs, we're not really resting our back, are we? Right? We're just hitting it in a slightly different way. So we've got to make sure that we are smart and strategic about the exercises that we're choosing and consider that spinal loading as well. Very important. Other comments coming in. What if you struggle with squats because of knee pain, Sue? That is a very good question, Sue, because it's one you get all the time. The weaknesses and the vulnerabilities that are there in your lower back, that are preventing your lower back from getting better, your inability to perform these exercises, are precisely the same kind of weaknesses and inefficiencies that prevent your knees from being healthy, that lead to dysfunctions in the hips as well. It is very, very common. And so the answer here is, well, how do you get out of the chair with your bad knee? You still do it, right? You still do it. So it's not stopping you doing things outside. It might be making those more uncomfortable, but learning about that bad knee and how much it can do is really important. There's not a reason not to do the squat. It's a reason to find the squat that you can do without aggravating the knee. So in Sue's case, it might well be that Sue has to hold onto a door frame and do a squat in the doorway, holding on, and her squat is only here, right? It might be really shallow, because if she bends the knees to here, it hurts too much. It creates a little bit of aggravation. So Sue has to start there because the knee is holding her back a little bit, but she still needs to do it because over here she can do the hip hinge and she can scale the load, increase the load on the hip hinge because it doesn't challenge the knee as much, right? It doesn't challenge the knee as much. So Sue, as she's working with her back rehab, will be leveraging things like the hip hinge and the single leg hip hinge as the primary building exercises for load tolerance in the spine because they don't challenge the knee as much, but she's still, make no mistake, she's still doing the squats, but she's just building that up a little bit more slowly because we have to move at the speed of the slowest soldier, the knee in this case. But there will be a time where the knee starts to do a lot better, and now Sue's doing bodyweight squats to here, and actually she can start building again, and maybe now the hip hinge is replaced by the squat because she's actually done the effective rehab to recover the knees and make the knee better. Right? That's what you should be doing. And that's also why these kind of things, they crop up with everybody. If you've had back pain for a long period of time, I mentioned this the other day. Right, so you guys know, or some of you guys know, I did a meniscus in my knee. I feel sorry for those of you that I've said this to about 1,000 times because I say it on more or less every live stream lately, but it's a very relevant example. I injured my knee. So for a little while, this is back in June, not injured, I tore both the meniscus in the knee, right? Left knee. For a little while, I was having to round my lower back. I was abusing my lower back because I could not bear any weight past a certain angle on my knee joint because of the meniscus damage, right? And so my back was abused. If I didn't deal with my knee properly, and my knee was going on as an ongoing issue for months to years, make no mistake, my back is going to be a problem. I'm going to get a herniated disc. I'm going to get all sorts of other problems, right? And the issue is, a lot of you guys have been struggling with your lower back for so long that you've made other areas that were trying to take the slack vulnerable and injured too. Or maybe the back was the thing that became the problem because Sue actually had bad knees before she injured her back, and now her back is bad, and now that's causing more problems. And it's actually because we didn't deal with the knees properly we did the classic error with the knees, which is just use them less, so the legs get weaker, so the knee gets worse, so you can do less and you're in more pain with the knees, so you do less, so you rely on the lower back more. Now the back becomes injured and the knee's a problem, and we feel like we're stuck and can go nowhere. And that affects more people than you'd probably, be aware. And the only thing you can do is break that cycle. You have to break that cycle. Jose said, may I send you my MRI for you to see? Of course, but you got to become a member. We do a lot of, we do put a lot of effort. I hope you guys, find it helpful. We do these lives, we do them a good couple times a week. We do tons of comments, tons of video stuff out there. But if you want that kind of help, you do need to become a member, right? We have members that regularly share their x-rays, their MRIs, reports, all that kind of stuff in the members area. But there's obviously a limit as to how much time we have every day, every week, to put out this free content. So please bear that in mind. Oscar said it is 100K squat, very good progress. I would suggest, Oscar, if you're hitting reps of 10 on 100 kilograms on your squat, that would be a very worthwhile target. I don't think, from seeing your videos, I don't think you're weighing in at 110 kilos, sorry, at 100 kilos, but that would certainly be a good target. You're in the fitness space. I think that's a very, very good target to have. You don't need to race towards it, but certainly a very good target, I would suggest, for sure. What other questions have you got? What injury should I start, as I'm having an injury 5 weeks before? Not really sure what we're saying there, Harry. A bit confused by that. Tito said, it is my understanding that we should not strengthen our efforts without centralisation. If my sciatica isn't getting any better, should I start doing some strengthening exercises? Yeah, so we are confused there, Tito. So, reading out Tito's comment in order, rather than in reverse order. Tito said, if my sciatica isn't getting any better, should I start doing some strengthening exercises? I understand that I should not do strengthening without centralisation. Understand that your symptoms of sciatica are that you have an injury in the lower back, okay? They are symptoms, right? Sciatica, back pain, buttock pain, whatever it is, symptoms. People have this mistaken belief that they shouldn't do any rehab or any strengthening or any proper, productive, goal-orientated rehabilitation exercises for their lower back until they are feeling better. This makes no sense, because as we see with back injuries, you are the biggest reason why your back is not getting better. You are not in suspended animation floating there while your back is healing and your sciatica is getting better. Tito, you are doing many things every single day. Right now you might be sat down, in which case you're putting 40 to 90% more load through those lumbar spine segments, which are at the root cause of your sciatica. You probably got up this morning out of bed. You're probably going to go to the bathroom at some point during the day and strain on the toilet to some degree or another. All of these things are putting strain through your lower back. So the idea that we're going to go about daily life, which has physical strain, many of you will probably agree that just the simple act of getting dressed in the morning, having coffee, taking the kids to school, or doing the many other things you do while you have those active symptoms is physically strenuous and mentally strenuous and probably emotionally strenuous as well. The notion that you should just carry on doing that and wait to do something that might be helpful, i.e. your rehabilitation work, until you feel better makes zero sense. And hopefully when we actually verbalize it, it's like, yeah, that actually sounds really not clever at all. I'm still doing stuff every day. Right? Back injuries are not the same as other injuries where you can wear a cast, a boot, use crutches, etc. You have to live with it every day, even with the best will in the world. So much of what you're doing every single day is making your back worse. And so the notion that you should put off doing something that will help you lessen the negative impact of all of those things and start to build technique is really wrong. It's so incorrect. It's so upside down. It's topsy-turvy. We have to get this the right way round. You're doing activities every single day. You can either continue to do activities that you have no care or attention to detail with regards to how you're looking after this spine, or you can start to do some that are going to have benefit. We discussed at the start of this live stream, I think it was Jeff's question, where we talked about the fact that as you start doing exercises, even from the first day, if you're actually sincerely going about doing these things properly, watching tutorial videos, making notes, recording yourself, you will be better by the end of that first day at the technique. That doesn't mean you're going to feel better. But it means that from day one, you are going to be improving the way in which you can control your spine. And therefore, from day one, you are going to be safer in this lower back. And you will find that from day 2, 3, 4, 5, as you continue to make improvement, you aggravate the root cause of your sciatica less frequently. And therefore it starts to settle down. So it is through doing the rehabilitation that you help settle down the symptoms. And as you progress through the process of rehabilitation, we structure it down into 4 phases, phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. As you progress through those phases, the symptoms start to abate. It happens at different rates for different people. There are a number of different reasons for that. But it is progressing through the process of rehabilitation that your symptoms get better. You don't wait till your symptoms to get better to then start the rehabilitation. Hopefully that makes very clear sense. And if you guys have any other questions on that, please do ask. GX has said how many days strengthening and how many days stretching. Generally speaking, we have 2 types of activities or workouts that we do. We have relief-based practices and we have our rehab. The rehab is the strengthening exercises that are actually getting us stronger. They are what changes this. They are what helps this heal, helps us get stronger, rebuild, restore integrity, make us safer. The relief-based practices are the things that we do every day to try and take strain off. Now, we discussed yesterday on the live session about 3 different types of relief exercise. You go and watch that afterwards. It's on the YouTube channel. Go check it out. So I won't repeat again here. But your relief stuff you do multiple times a day, which includes some stretching, but the stretching must be correct. It must not be the 3rd type of stretch. Stretches that feel nice but are making the problem worse. A knee hug, a child pose, knee rocking, sciatic flossing. Those are all bad examples. Why? Because they violate the principles of a neutral spine and have you rounding the lumbar spine all over the place. Very important that we don't make those mistakes. And then we focus on building our rehab and we do our relief work on the side. What is this question here? Came on a couple of weeks ago. I was given pain relief. Given now, with your advice went. Have been given a back brace for 3 months minimum. I'm not sure what we're doing with the back brace. We discussed the other day, guys, back braces. If you are using back braces, we're not understanding fundamentals, right? Back braces do not protect the area of the lumbar spine that most of you guys have your issues. Most of you guys will have issues at L4-5, which is these last 2 green ones, and L5-S1, the last part of the lumbar spine. Assuming you're not a skeleton, the lowest the brace is going to go is around about the body of L4 vertebra and up. So you're bracing this area here, which means you're now restricting movement through the upper lumbar spine. And the movement that was going to go through the upper lumbar spine is now going to be focused to this area, making the problem worse. The belt's something to be avoided as a general rule. And I'm skeptical as to even the utility of a belt, period. We discussed on a couple of live sessions ago, we discussed the belts and the fact that they don't actually limit any flexion in any material way. And by the way, the research that is done on the utility of belts is not done with actual imaging work. Most of it is done using physical observations and measurements, which are not accurate. They're just not accurate at observing segmental motion of the lumbar spine. So it's just rubbish. It's rubbish commentary. And when it is actually looked at in some kind of detail, we find that the belts don't prevent lumbar flexion. What prevents lumbar flexion, prevents you provoking the L4-5 and L5-S1 segments, is you being taught how to do these things correctly, not just using a belt and hoping it'll go away. That false sense of security even might well be even worse. So very important that we consider these things. Shiba says, I have an L4-5 hernia and irritation. Could I eventually do deadlifts and squats after recovery? You might build up to doing a deadlift in the future, because I do think that fundamentally, if you're incorporating a deadlift in a strategic way, you have to ask yourself the question, are you ever going to pick anything up off the floor again? And if the answer to that is yes, which obviously it is, then you need to have a subconscious way of doing it correctly. And so the practice of doing the deadlift long-term, not immediately, right? We don't, notice I didn't say their deadlifts were in the rehab strategy that we use. I just said hip hinges, which are not deadlifts. But if you don't learn how to do those movements, you will have to do those movements without any technical skill or practice. And then it's a roll of the dice, whether you get away with it or not. But squats and hip hinges are fundamental exercises from day one. They are from day one. Why? Because you're already doing them every day. Again, so we can live in this idealistic world. Someone might make the case, and they could probably make it reasonably fairly, for not doing any of those kind of exercises straight away. And then you ask them the question, but how is the patient going to exist without doing those movements? And if they can't exist in the real world, in reality, without doing the movement of the squat and the hip hinge, then wouldn't it stand to reason that we teach them how to do that in a significantly expedited manner, placing significant importance on that, so that when they are doing it in the real world, which they can't avoid, by the way, they are going to be safer doing so. That is, it blows the argument of not doing those kind of things out of the water. Christian said, I looked at an IDD system yesterday, but was told it is not always suitable for long-term disc issues if they have some desiccation. Christian, that'll be a clinical judgment by the individual. And it depends on how long they've been using the decompression table for. It depends on their personal ethos around how they're practicing. And that might be generally why they're saying what they're saying. Because a lot of the clinicians will focus on a very much regimented protocol, and maybe they don't have the experience of doing it over the years. That leads them to start to think about things in a slightly different way. I think fundamentally, when you're doing decompression, we always test people, and I've always tested people before they even go on the table. So you have an idea of how their body responds to the decompression movement. And you're generally looking for nothing or a relief. Some people will find it's painful, and so therefore we have to look at the appropriate levels of strength. But if you're using the standardized IDD pulling forces, I would argue for certain people with certain types of issues, those pulling forces lead to the increased soreness that I mentioned, I think, the other day on the live. And that's one of the reasons that we use softer forces in the clinic here. So that's kind of a more clinical experience comment there than anything else, because I've been using spinal decompression since late 2014-ish. So I've been using it for a while. We've got the table at the back, the AD table at the back. I've also used a number of other systems as well over the years, spinal decompression systems. And when we started out using them, you were very much more rigid to the protocols that were recommended. But over the years, as you're practicing using these things, you start to realize that actually, do you know what? There is this phrase, I've said it before, softness beats force. And what you find is that people find it's a little bit, it's just a more overall, more pleasant experience. If you test well for decompression in the clinic, or you test correctly, then I think it's worthwhile doing. But again, you have to have a clinician that feels comfortable enough to do that, right? If they're very much sticking to the more rigid protocols, which is fair enough when they've just started doing the decompression, then that might explain why they're doing it. Darren has said, so sorry, I've got to go. We'll be in touch. You're more than welcome to, Darren. Check out that link that I posted, and you can head over to the website, backinshapeprogram.com. Guys, we're going to be wrapping it up shortly anyway. We've got the last 10, 12 minutes or so of the live. I do hope it's been helpful, and thank you to all of you guys that have joined on the live. It's been really appreciated. I see there's a couple more questions coming in. So I'll go through some of those. But guys, just a reminder, if you do find these helpful, please do consider sharing them out. It's really been really cool seeing some of you guys tagging us on videos on TikTok and sharing it. That's really, really appreciated. And obviously those of you guys on YouTube and stuff, like, thank you very much for all the comments. They really do, they make it more fun for everybody involved, right? I know I get the analytics afterwards, and there's tons of people that join the lives and are watching for a good amount of time, and there's a number of you that are commenting and asking questions, and there's a lot of comments on TikTok, right? And I try and get through as many as I can, but thank you to all of you that do post the comments, and of course, if you need any more help and support, if you have been struggling for a long period of time, if you're on TikTok, go and check out the link up in the profile page. On the website, there is a video that explains a little bit more about the program, and it can give a bit more guidance on what we do and how we help you guys. And if you like what you see, you can always check out and sign up to the program. Just coming back to some of these questions now, Leo has said, this guy is the goat. Thank you. For anyone who's curious, if you have back issues, you're missing out on the solution. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Leo. That's very kind of you. And guys, thank you for the kind comments. They are nice. We got a nice little DM from a very appreciative fan the other day. He said, you talk a load of rubbish, and just left it at that. And I said, okay, thank you. Thank you for that. So it's very nice when you get some of the hate comments, and I appreciate that as well. At least they've taken the time to comment. But the nice ones, they're appreciated significantly more. So thank you. What else have we got here? Can you expand more on relief exercises? The ones you mentioned are the ones my physio says to do. Yeah, the knee hugs, child's pose. I'll explain why the knee hugs, child's pose, sciatic flossing, knee rocks type exercises are incorrect. We've got videos, profile page on TikTok, on the right sort of ones to do decompression, even a hamstring stretch, you might have been given a hamstring stretch, but if you're giving it incorrectly, right? If you're told to do a hamstring stretch like this, that's incorrect. If you're told to do a hamstring stretch and focus on the neutral spine, go like so, without bending the back, then that's correct, right? Rounding the lower back is not. So that's an important point of distinction. Often there is the philosophy that your spine's stiff, is tight, and you're in pain, and that's the problem, and we just need to move it, right? That is wrong. You have an injury in your back. Helpful example. A lot of you guys will have, at some point yourself, or know someone who has, sprained a wrist. What happens, right? Do you know what? I'm going to use my knee example again. You would think that I'm injuring myself on purpose for these kind of things, but I'm not, honestly. The last injury was very, very inconvenient right before a competition. My knee, it got injured. Tissues were damaged. When I strained those tissues, it hurt to the point where my knee just gave way. I had a lot of swelling. So my tissues are injured. Now, thankfully, I didn't have any ligament damage, but if I had, it would have been, I would argue, maybe even worse. My knee was swollen and inflamed, which meant that the movement was stiff. I couldn't close it because there was too much fluid in here. One of the big problems that you guys get in the lower back, I'll get the other spine, is that when you have an injury to your lower back, you have a lot of inflammation that builds up around the injury, right? I said I had the meniscus strains, and I've got golf ball size swelling when I close my knee joint. There's a little golf ball here because there's so much inflammation in the joint. Look at the size of these spaces where the nerves come out. They are tiny. They're big enough, but they're tiny. When you move and bend the spine into different positions, the hole sizes change, which means if there's extra fluid in here, the pressure changes. So when your spine moves one way or another, that can give you pain. And they know there's inflammation, and then you get stiffness. Well, you have stiffness as a result of the inflammation, and then you've got pain, which gives more stiffness because of muscle spasm, etc. And so they are focused on those things, not the actual problem. And so, so they say, oh, we just move it around, because it's stuck. It's like it's stuck because it's injured, and it's sore because there's excess inflammation in here creating pressure. So we need to have other strategies to manage that kind of stuff. But what's really interesting is as your body heals, if you're doing the right sort of rehab, going back to the knee example or the wrist example, it was stiff and it hurt when it moved. As it heals and the tissues that are injured start to remodel and restore their integrity, all of a sudden, hey presto, it can move properly again. I didn't need to do any funny movements, right? It can move properly again. I couldn't close the knee joint properly because of the swelling before. I can now, right? The wrist, my wrist is swollen up. I can't move it properly. I don't need to be there repeatedly doing this kind of movement to get my wrist moving. I need it to heal and it'll move properly again. Now granted, sometimes there are residual stiffnesses and rigidities in certain tissues that need a little bit of extra work, but that's at the end, not at the start, especially with the spine, because you can't control the individual movement of L5-S1. You have no clue. I discussed at length the topic of the knees over toes stuff yesterday and this forward bending of the lumbar spine. The problem with the spine is you don't know how much it's moving at the segment that is injured. And so these guys are just running the proviso that there's inflammation in your lower back, it's tight. Because it's tight and inflammation, that's your problem, and you need to stretch it out. And they're just operating at like the surface level. They're not going, why is it tight? Why is it inflamed? Because there's an injury. Okay, what is strained in that injury? And what would put that disc or that section of the spine to more strain? And how can I avoid that? What would provoke it? And how can I avoid that? And how can I create an environment to protect this little herniated disc while it goes through a healing process and then steadily support the healing? It's just a very low tier, unsophisticated view of back pain. And that's why you go there and you get the sheet of exercises and that's all. A sheet of exercises is a shopping list. It's not a recovery program or rehabilitation. It's just a shopping list. And that, unfortunately, is the low effort prescription of these exercises. You basically are at the point where you may as well go in like you do in like McDonald's or whatever, and you just put your order on the screen and then you get your receipt of your exercise and you go home and do them. Because there's no flexibility, and this is not at all, please make no mistake, this is not at all a criticism of the individual physio that might be there at your NHS appointment. They don't have the ability to move laterally in these sorts of scenarios because they're constrained to operate within the system. You have to understand that. A great example, and I'll finish with this because we're getting towards the end of the live stream. Well, maybe I'll take a couple more questions, depends how long I ramble on with this about. One of the members, I've shown you guys on the wall out in the side here before, and you can search for her on on the website. Just go into media coverage, and it's in there. It's featured in the Daily Express here in the UK newspaper. Big double-page spread. It was awesome. She was a GP with significant sciatica. Joined the program because what she had to recommend, that sheet of exercises, don't work. And then she goes, because she's, in the field, so to speak, a bit more knowledge, a bit more detailed probing questions of us on these live sessions and things like that, and in the members area, and develops that understanding, and is like, okay, why am I forced to recommend this in my NHS GP practice? This works, the program, right? This makes sense. The critiques of what I have to recommend in the GP's practice make sense as well, and it makes you view things differently. The problem is she's not allowed to recommend the program. So she's there seeing patients that every so often come in with back pain or sciatica, and she's like, well, I'm doing this program over here, but I can't say anything about that because I'm not allowed to. I'm not allowed to. I have to give you this rubbish stuff that I know doesn't work, and I know now why it doesn't work, and I know how stupid it is for me to have to recommend this. But I can't do anything about it because that's the system that we're operating under. And I'm paraphrasing, but that's the general gist, right? And so that's why you guys get those exercises. You have to also bear in mind the NHS is like a massive, massive organization. So the time frames it takes to get different ways of thinking through in these kind of scenarios is like so long, so long. From a bureaucratic point of view. What else have we got here on TikTok? Hope that's helpful. Christian said, I agree. How many YouTubers share the depth of knowledge absolutely free? Yeah, I think like for me anyway, it's quite important because like we had a troll come on to TikTok the other day. He was like, you don't know what you're talking about. You've got no credentials. And it's like, what do you mean? How do you know that? You don't know anything. You just come onto a TikTok live and you're just spouting off stuff and it's silliness, right? But I believe personally, rightly or wrongly, that coming onto these lives, fielding questions, talking about this, that's why we've done a podcast, hundreds of episodes of the podcast, talking at length, writing at length about this stuff. Like, if you know your stuff, and you're not just going on AI and getting some stuff and just putting it out there with a chopped up video that's chopped into a number of pieces, if you can actually talk about this stuff at length and take questions and give answers and demonstrate rationale, then you know what you're talking about. A lot of people that are doing this stuff online probably can't because they don't have that depth of information, or that depth of knowledge, that depth of experience, that depth of understanding. And so my rationale, or our rationale, was that well, if you put it out for free, you can demonstrate at least what you know. And also, people can hopefully feel a bit more confident in that as well, rather than putting out some overly polished videos that are chopped 1,000 times. And maybe when you actually question someone live on those kind of things, the holes in the understanding start to appear rather quickly. So, yeah, just a comment. I appreciate that, Christian. Thank you. Ahmed said, I'm in pain for 8 weeks. I started doing the hip hinge the past week. I'm feeling better. But how long will it take to heal? Some days I'm feeling worse. Ahmed, you've got to do the full thing, right? It's a rehabilitation process, not exercise. It's a very, very important distinction, right? You don't do exercises to get better from back pain. You do a rehabilitation process to get better from back pain. Because the squat, as it is done by the person, or the hip hinge, as Ahmed is doing it right now, is going to be very different to the hip hinge that he's doing later on. And the way in which the individual workout that he's doing right now is going to differ. You have to change the way you're doing these things over time to make sure that you're driving progress. So it takes time. But really, you use your performance on that hip hinge to drive the healing process. It is healing every single day, Ahmed. You have to ask the question, healed for what precisely? How healed does it need to be? Manny has said, it will take a very long time. I have been having sciatica for 10 months now. The problem is, if you're doing, we've got Saudi Arabia coming in, IL-5S1 herniated disc with sciatica for 3 months. I've been following, oh, cool. Following your very helpful instructions. Thank God I'm free of symptoms. Oh, awesome. That's cool. Thank you for sharing. The important thing to understand here, guys, is that firstly, healed for what, right? You might be healed enough to pick up a bottle, or to pick up your toddler, or to pick up a suitcase, but you're not healed enough to pick up something heavier. And so that's the real important question. How do I know when I'm healed for X? You know, because you're doing a hip hinge with body weight right now, Ahmed. In the future, you're going to be doing a hip hinge with significantly more weight. So you know you're healed for exactly how much weight. It's not a foolproof plan. Or rather, it's not a foolproof measure. It is a foolproof plan, I would argue, but it's not a foolproof measure. If you can hip hinge, 30 kilos, that's great. You know you're up to 30 kilos. the quirks of life are going to be such that there are going to be extra challenges, but at least you've got some kind of measure, because the problem is everybody, or so many people that have back injuries that they're recovering from, have no measure of how healed they are at all. Like they have no measure whatsoever. So at least with your squat and hip hinge, you've got some kind of idea of the status quo in the lower back as it pertains to its ability to carry out its function, which is control and carry load. Oh, that's cool. Oscar said, to be honest, the first time I joined the program, I couldn't hold on the towel decompression for 5 minutes, but now I don't feel pain during it. Yeah, Oscar. Oh, well, thank you, Mike and Laura. Yeah, thank you, Oscar. The towel, unfortunately, like, you have to understand, so many of you guys spend so many hours every day sat rounding the lower back. And so many of the exercises you get given are hugging and rounding the lower back even more. So is it any wonder that when you start actually supporting the curve, it's actually quite uncomfortable? Oscar's very similar to, I would say probably close to 50%, if not a little bit more, of people that start doing the towel find it uncomfortable to start with. And you don't push it, but it isn't, because it's putting you in a direction that you haven't been in a long time. So I think I'll finish on that. Guys, I hope it's been really helpful for you. Thank you for joining on the Friday. Thank you for all the questions. It's been going a little bit, there's been a lot in here, which has been good. Good fun to see. Sorry for those of you I didn't get a chance to answer the questions. If you need more help over the weekend, guys, check out the program. If you've been struggling with back pain, you're struggling with sciatica, you've had it for 8 weeks, you had it for 8 months, you've had it for 8 years, check out the link up in the profile page. If you're over on TikTok, if you're on the YouTube channel, check out the pinned comment. backinshapeprogram.com/start. There's a video there that explains a little bit more about the program. It'll help you, or how it can help you. And of course, if you like what you see and you like this kind of stuff and you like the way we think about things and talk about things, you will like it even more when you're in the program, because there is so much there to help you guys. The members area, the program itself, the education, the strategy, the tutorial videos, the live workouts, and much, much more coming as well in the pipeline. For those of you that are on, like Oscar and others, we've got some cool announcements, which will hopefully be coming out for members in the next couple of weeks, I hope. So, thanks, guys. Have a great weekend, have a great Friday, and see you next time. YouTube. Thank you guys for joining. Sorry those of you that came in late. I do apologize for not getting to all the questions. Post them in the comments and or in the comment after the chat. If you need more help, guys, you can always check out the link. I'll paste it here just now, quickly. And Oscar, thank you very much for the endorsement. Oscar, you've been doing some great work. So, those squats the other day, they were really good, right? Just make sure you stick to 10 reps. 10 reps, not, don't be tempted to go down to lower rep ranges for the time being. And make sure you're factoring in that rest with the hard sessions now, because you're at that right kind of point. It's really cool. Just keep making that steady progress, Remember, especially for those of you guys that are, quote unquote, have a background in training, right? Whether it's fitness trainer yourself, or whether you're just a recreational trainer, or anything in between, that your muscles change faster than your spine. So we just have to make sure that we don't overcook it as we start to get back into the joy of training. And, and for some of you guys, it's really going to be a feature and something that you look forward to and something that you embrace, you're so happy about. Just don't get carried away, please. Okay? Give your body time. And obviously we're there to help you guys that are members in the members area. Thank you. Have a great weekend, and see you next time, guys.